You can find his work on davejanda.com or on his YouTube channel, Operation Freedom. And I am very happy and honored to have Dave on the X22 Report Spotlight. Dave, welcome to the Spotlight.
Dave, thanks for having me aboard the X22 platform. I have been a long time fan and supporter of yours. I think you do phenomenal work, and I'm honored to be a part of your platform today.
Thank you very much, and I'm very honored to have you here. And I spoke to you on the Bill Holter interview that we did with Sean and the rest of the crew, and that was great. And I was thinking, I never had him on here, and I should have him on here, and here you are.
Well, thanks for having me aboard.
Yes. Let's start off with what's going on in the U.S. with Trump and with certain players in the deep state. Recently, Trump released the statement from the press secretary where he's going to declassify FISA, declassify text messages. Why do you think he decided to go ahead and declassify this information? Why did he do it at this time?
Well, I think this was in the works for a number of months' duration. And I do believe that timing is everything. And right before Sarah Sanders made this announcement, this is when Dianne Feinstein stepped up to the plate and said, I have this letter that I've had for, I don't know, at that point, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, from someone who has accused Judge Kavanaugh of beyond sexual harassment, sexual assault, essentially. And I believe that at that point, Trump had always planned on declassifying the FISA warrants and the text messages. I believe he announced he was going to declassify the text messages between McCabe and Comey. And also the 302 forms. 302 forms are the forms filled out by FBI agents when they interview someone, in this particular someone being Bruce Orr from the Department of Justice. I believe Trump was waiting with the declassification announcement to be played at the appropriate time. The appropriate time, I believe he determined, was, okay, you're going to do this to Kavanaugh. You're going to put this stake in the ground right now. What we're going to do is, you show your hand, here comes my hand. And I have a royal flush. See, I believe this declassification event, the bought-off lamestream fake media, the CNNs of the world, the MSNBCs, the whatever, are making this into a non-event. That this is not an important step. I believe it's a huge step, and I believe it is the trigger for I believe this reset that you and I and a number of other folks have spoken about, reset of the rule of law in this country, and this absolutely petrifies the deep state. You see, one of the mechanisms that I believe the deep state has used to further their agenda and to further their control and influence over our country and, frankly, the world, has been one of their first objectives is to usurp, to denigrate, to destroy the rule of law when it comes to their self-interests and the interests of their puppets being the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Soroses, the Romneys, the McCains, the McConnells, the Ryans, you name it, across the board. And that's an important point to make, Dave. When we speak about the deep state, and this is experience I got early on when I first went to Washington to work on healthcare policy, which is as far back as 1988, when Reagan had heard about a lot of our research in prevention and cost containment, and his administration had asked me to come to Washington and work with C. Everett Koop, who was the then Surgeon General, and several others, in particular Jack Kemp, who was a congressman at the time but worked on a lot of the domestic policy issues for Reagan, and work on healthcare cost containment. It became very obvious to me, even back then, 30 years ago, Dave, that there was this unnamed group behind the curtain that had significant influence. And the name of that group we now have is the deep state. And the way they have amassed such power and control is through their intended breakdown of the rule of law. And I believe that one of Trump's objectives in taking down what he calls the swamp, which is the generic term for the deep state, is a restitution of the rule of law. And I believe that this is the one piece of the puzzle that the deep state feared, was that Trump would start to declassify documents, exposing the truth. The deep state loves, that works in the dark. They're cockroaches. They work in the dark. They are their enemy. The thing they fear the most is transparency, because transparency exposes their business model, which is about control and corruption, bribery and blackmail. So when they came out with this attack on Kavanaugh, saying, "Here we have this person. She's unnamed, and we're not going to give you, but we're going to hold up his nomination process." And remember, the Supreme Court getting that fifth vote is very important when it comes to the restitution of the rule of law. So when they took that step, Trump said, "You play that hand, here comes my hand." And his hand was the declassification hand. And we know it struck a nerve, because all we have to do is look at the reaction immediately after Sarah Sanders made that announcement. Hillary Clinton went on this incredible tweet storm, okay? And the one that caught my eye was where she said this: "Donald Trump refuses to be subject to the law." Now, in medical terms, there's a condition called projection, where the condition you project on others. I even believe this is a classic case of projection. Donald Trump refuses to be subject to the law. Really, Hillary? Tell us about that illegal personal server you had that compromised the national security of our country, that it's been documented through the Inspector General of the intelligence divisions, intelligence community, that tens of thousands of your emails went directly to China, which reportedly led to the assassination of at least 18 of our CIA operatives in China. So one more time, Hillary, about subject to the rule of law. Okay. Then she went on. "The legitimacy of our elections is in doubt." More projection, Dave. Okay. "The legitimacy of our elections in doubt." Hillary, tell us about Bernie Sanders. Tell us about how you and your organization and the DNC threw the election to you and essentially stole a number of states, if not the nomination, from Bernie Sanders. Then she goes on. "The president is waging war on the truth." This from the person. Now, we can get into many sides of the truth with Hillary. But how about this one? Her campaign and the DNC funded the fake Russian dossier. Truth, Hillary? She goes on. "The administration is undermining the national unity that makes democracy possible." The national unity. This from the person who called anyone who didn't support her deplorable. Okay. And she finishes with, "And then there's the breathtaking corruption." Okay, we already mentioned the personal server being a criminal offense, but what about Uranium One? How, that's not corrupt, a pay to play program where you, Hillary, benefited your foundation for $145 million and 20% of the United States uranium supply went to Russia? Or what about the multitude of campaign finance violations she and her campaign had just in the 2016 election? So when she came out with this tweet storm that included what I just spoke about, you knew Trump hit a nerve. And then very soon after that, we had Biden talk about Trump supporters as being, quote, dregs of society, end quote. Here's what he said, quote, "This is deadly earnest. We are in a fight for America's soul. There are a small percentage of the American people, virulent people, some of them, the dregs of society," end quote. When you start seeing reactions like that, and then you start seeing the hysterics of Pelosi and Schumer, where they start speaking about worse and wrote in a letter to the Department of Justice saying, ignore Trump's order to declassify and ignore about the no redaction part. Well, how, I mean, this is not, they're not coming at this, whether it's Hillary or Biden or Pelosi or Schumer or Adam Schiff with what he wrote or what Comey was tweeting about or what this congressman in California who's a big progressive globalist, Eric, whatever his name is, saying that, he's going to compromise sources. And we have other individuals such as Nunes and a number of other people saying, wait a minute, there's not going to be any compromise of sources with declassifying these 20 pages. There's not going to be anyone who is going to be put in harm's way, as Hillary did with her personal server, with the tens of thousands of emails that went to China that led to the deaths of 18 CIA operatives in China. No, but these people are not coming at this, Dave, from a position of power. They're coming, when they start doing things like this, they're coming at it from a position of weakness, desperation, and panic. And frankly, as irritated as you might be, I might be, our listening audience might be, any thinking American who's not bought into the propaganda of the bought-off lamestream fake media that's owned by the deep state and the globalist syndicate, we get very uncomfortable with this. I get very uncomfortable with Hillary's tweets and Biden saying this stuff and Pelosi and Schumer essentially telling Department of Justice, you know what, we want you to perform an unconstitutional act and not do a thing. And we want you to create a constitutional crisis. I mean, these are people that are not coming at it from the good of the country, because when you boil it all down to what Trump's declassification order is about, transparency, about letting the American people see behind the curtain in this one instance of what really happened. And these folks are panicked. So I'm very uncomfortable with their response. But I truly believe there's at least one person who's sitting back, smiling, and pleased about their reaction. And that's President Trump. I truly believe that he is overjoyed with their response because it exposes them as people that are not interested in transparency, in the good of the country, in the welfare of the country, in following the Constitution, but as people who obviously are compromised somehow, who are trying to block transparency, block the Constitution from being implemented in this case. And I think he sits back and he smiles because he knows when they have this kind of reaction that he's in their head, not just part of the day, but he's in their head 24/7. And he knows when he's in their head 24/7, he's defeated them. It's just a matter of time before it becomes even apparent to the most brain dead, the most propagandized of our population.
Yeah, and I was just thinking when you were talking about that, I mean, if there was nothing, with the FISA, with the text message, and it was just a nothing burger, they wouldn't be reacting like this because they wouldn't care. But
right. So you're exactly right, Dave. And look at Trump's reaction to this woman Ford, who's come forward against Kavanaugh. What did Trump say? Trump comes out. Everybody was expecting him to go, "Oh, let's just push ahead with the vote right away." Trump came out and calmly said, "You know what? These are serious charges. These are very concerning charges. We need to have an open forum where all voices are heard." Right? That's what he said.
Yep.
He said, "Let's hear what she has to say. Let's hear what she has to say in public." Look at what Grassley has done. Grassley said, "We need to hear from the person themselves, and we need to hear Kavanaugh's response to this. And we can do it in a public hearing. We can do it in a private hearing. We can do it over the phone. We can do it with no senators there if these people are intimidated by senators." Obviously, Kavanaugh isn't, because he already sat in front of a bunch of these goofballs for a couple days on end. But this Ford person, we can have our staffs meet her and Kavanaugh and tell us what they found. We can even make it so that she doesn't have to travel. We can go out to California to speak with her. We can, if she doesn't want to talk, she will have our staffs come out to California. So we see Trump's reaction to this event. We see Grassley's reaction to this event. Now, how has Ford and her attorney responded? Well, she's not going to show up on Monday, and she's not for a public hearing. Okay. Well, she's not even going to show up for a private hearing. Okay. Well, she's not going to even talk. You can't come out here and talk to her. Well, that's where we stand today. So, as you said, Dave, if the way Hillary, Biden, Comey, Schumer, Pelosi, and we can go on and on, responded to Trump's declassification card is drastically different from the way Trump and Grassley, just to name two, and the Republican majority, have responded to these very concerning, serious charges against Brett Kavanaugh. And I should put on the table, Dave, I've had some hesitation about Kavanaugh. And the reason for my hesitation is because, in my mind, anybody who's close to the Bushes or the Clintons or the Obama, I'm not comfortable with. I've been, as I said, I started going to DC in '88 and did some consulting stuff throughout the years, exclusive of Obama, because my approach to healthcare reform is more of a free market approach, and his is anything but. His is about a government control, government takeover approach. But whether it was Bush 1, Bush 2, or Clinton, I came to realize very quickly, and this is why we really have one political party in our country, the Republicrats, that are owned and operated, I believe, by a criminal syndicate. And I believe any nominee that's close to the Bushes, Clintons, or Obama is not somebody, if I was president, I would have nominated. And I'm not going to say the guy shouldn't be on the court, but I am going to say he's not somebody that I feel very comfortable with based on his relationship and his closeness to the Bushes.
Do you think when the declassification comes out, do you think this is going to put the kibosh on the Mueller investigation? Like, once this comes out and people find out the truth, that there was no Russian collusion or anything like that, what would be the purpose of Mueller investigating anything?
Well, I think it's going to lend more fuel to that fire. But remember, there's a person who already started that blaze about Mueller, and that was Lisa Page from the FBI. When Lisa Page testified closed door to Congress, and this just came out from John Solomon on the Hill, and this was reported, I didn't see it reported on CNN or NBC or MSNBC or CBS or ABC, but from zero, FBI had no clue about Trump-Russia collusion when Mueller took office, according to Lisa Page. Quote, this is from John Solomon on the Hill. After 9 months of using some of the most awesome surveillance powers afforded to U.S. intelligence, the FBI still had not made a case connecting Trump or his campaign to Russia's election meddling, end quote, John Solomon from the Hill. A newly reported comment made by former FBI attorney Lisa Page during her recent testimony to Congress has revealed a monumentous fact. According to John Solomon, after 9 months, which included the use of a well-paid spy to infiltrate the Trump campaign, that would be, I believe, Stephen Halper, who was paid at least $1 million, former CIA ties. He was paid through the Pentagon. He's associated with GCHQ, the intelligence service, if you will, in Britain. The FBI had no clue whether there was any collusion between Trump world and Russia when the case was handed over to special counsel Robert Mueller. What's the whole reason why having Mueller investigate this? Quote, this is what Page said during her testimony. Quote, it's a reflection of us still not knowing, Page told Representative John Ratcliffe of Texas when questioned about texts she and Strzok exchanged in May of 2017 as Mueller was being named special prosecutor to take over the Russia investigation. With that statement, Page acknowledged a monumentous fact that after 9 months, they had no evidence of Trump or his campaign colluding with Russia and Russia meddling in the election. Page further opined and acknowledged, quote, it still existed in the scope of possibilities that there would be literally nothing, end quote. You see, Dave, I think she started the ball a-rolling. And I do believe that Lisa Page, although I believe was part of the problem, I believe early on, as far back potentially as January 2017, she was flipped by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz. And I believe she was supplying a lot of information on not only Strzok, but McCabe and Comey and a number of the other players, Prestop and Baker, a number of these players within the FBI as well as Department of Justice. So I believe, yes, long answer to your short question, when the declassification occurs, I believe it's going to support what Lisa Page has already come out as saying. And it's going to add more meat to those bones because it's going to add more detail as far as what was done. And, you know, I've always had a question about Mueller in my mind. And some people can say, this is conspiracy theory, this is crazy. But I've been told from people I know and trust, very high level, the day before Mueller was named special counsel, he had a 4-hour meeting with Trump. 4 hours with Trump.
Right.
Now, Donald Trump, I have a knowledge base on Donald Trump and his meetings. My dad was in the construction industry. He had some meetings, and this is 30 years ago. with Donald Trump. And my dad was a general contractor, civil engineer, built buildings in Chicago, had meetings with Trump. And his take about Trump was, he goes, the guy in private's very different than the guy in public. He goes, the guy is in private is not in your face. He goes, he listens. And he goes, the thing I like about Trump is, he goes, you can tell him something he doesn't want to hear, and he listens. And he goes, he always has really good people around him that are really smart, that you can count on as being honest. And the other thing my dad said is, you have a meeting with Trump, and it's the most efficient meeting you've ever been involved with in your life. Now, that was from my dad 30 years ago. So now I hear that Mueller, the day before he's appointed special counsel, has a 4-hour meeting with Trump. Now, the media reported on this, and they said, well, he was being interviewed for the FBI director job since Comey was fired. It's my understanding that since Mueller had previously held that position through, I think, 2013,
right,
he could not be reinstated as FBI director because he previously held that position. And I believe that rule is on the books because they didn't want another situation like J. Edgar Hoover. So if he could not be appointed FBI director because he already held that position, what was Trump meeting with him for 4 hours beforehand, for the day before he was announced special counsel, right?
Right.
And if my dad was correct, and anyone who I've ever known who's met with Trump says the very similar thing about meetings with Trump. They're slam, bam, thank you, ma'am. I mean, just boom, 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 boom. 4-hour meeting with Trump. That's a long meeting. And the question I've always had is, what was really happening at that meeting? Because it surely wasn't for interviewing for the FBI director position.
No, most likely not. I mean, I can just, to be a fly on a wall right there, that it would be amazing.
So Mueller's role in this, I know how he is portrayed. I understand that. And I understand that he is seen as an enemy of Trump and the Trump movement. I understand that that's how it's been painted. But there's, in my mind, when I add up these little pieces of information, I still don't have a handle. I still cannot bite that apple fully.
Are you saying that Mueller is working with Trump?
It's a question I have. It's a question I have, and I'll tell you. And I've watched this really closely because it struck me ever since that May meeting. And in May of 2017, when he was appointed, and it was reported, you can do your favorite search engine, that Mueller had a meeting with Trump the day before he was appointed for 4 hours. And I've always sat back on that piece of information, and I thought, let's watch Mueller. So what's happened since Mueller has become the special counsel? Well, I'm looking at a list, Dave, of 26 individuals in the FBI and Department of Justice who've been either fired or resigned, right? McCabe, Deputy Director, fired. Peter Strzok, counterintelligence expert, fired. Lisa Page, demoted, resigned. Rubicki, Chief of Staff, resigned. James Baker, General Counsel, resigned. Mike Cortan, Assistant Director for Public Affairs, resigned. Josh Campbell, Special Assistant to James Comey, resigned. James Turgel, Executive Assistant Director, resigned. Goes on. Department of Justice, Sally Yates, Deputy Attorney General, fired. Bruce Ord, Associate Deputy Attorney General, demoted twice and on the bubble right now. Reportedly, I think you've heard this as well, a cooperating witness. David Loftman, counterintelligence chief, resigned. Rachel Brand, deputy attorney general, resigned. And it goes on. Peter Kazik, Mary McCord, blah, blah, blah. So I'm looking at all this. And then let's look at the people that he's prosecuted. Paul Manafort. He wasn't prosecuted on Russian collusion, was he?
No, he was not.
Nothing associated with the campaign. It was on financial transactions that occurred, 13 years ago?
Yep.
Okay. Then we have Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos, what did he get? A 2 weeks in jail?
Correct.
Wow, that's big. For what? Lying to the FBI? I think that was it. He wasn't, right?
Yeah, he was lying, yes.
Right, okay. So then we got Flynn, who Comey said that he testified that he believed Flynn did not lie, right?
Right.
Yet General Flynn, who I believe is an innocent man, pled guilty to lying. Now, why would he do that? Well, maybe to protect whatever financial resources he had left after this goat rodeo, but also to protect his family, right? And then Mueller has deferred on sentencing him at least 3 times, and I think the latest now is that he'll be sentenced in December. There's a lot going to happen before December, Dave.
I agree. And there's word that Flynn most likely is going to be let go and free from all of this.
Right. Because, we have people that reportedly the reason why it made it look like he lied is because his 302 forms, the forms that are filled out by FBI agents when they have a meeting with somebody, it appears that his 302 forms could well have been changed, which is what made him look like he lied. Because there were 2 people that interviewed him, it's my understanding, Strzok and a guy by the name of Platenka. And Platenka's story is very different from Strzok's story. And then there's this, rumor that McCabe is the one who pushed Strzok to change the forms. So when you look at Mueller, what did he do? Did he try to create an even balanced group to investigate this Russian collusion? No. He brought a bunch of Hillary's people together, and he brought a bunch of Obama's people together, and he put them all in the same room, didn't he?
Yes.
And what has come out of that room? A guy who was convicted on financial charges from 13 years ago, a guy who pled guilty to lying to the FBI when it appears he didn't lie to the FBI, and a guy who reportedly lied to the FBI who got 2 weeks in jail. But what it did do is it created a situation where it kept all these biased zealots of Hillary and Obama in a big room all together, feeding off of each other, and kept them really busy. And he was monitoring everything they were doing. And some of these people that were in the room were people like who? Strzok, right? Well, he's in a lot of trouble and he got fired. And what if one of these people that he brought in the room, as I mentioned, Lisa Page, was already flipped by the Inspector General Horowitz as far back as January 2017? She could well be the modern version of Deep Throat. So in my mind, and I know many people have find this very hard to believe. I'm not convinced of the narrative that Mueller is 100% playing against Trump. And remember what Trump keeps saying. Everybody thinks Trump just shoots his mouth off and doesn't think about what he's saying. Maybe sometimes that might be true, but the things that he keeps repeating, I find to be pretty well thought out, actually. So what has he characterized Robert Mueller's investigation? Keeps saying it time and time again. He doesn't go a day without saying it, that it's a witch hunt.
Yep.
Right? Okay. If you went to Donald Trump and say, Donald, would you ever call yourself a witch? No. I don't think Donald Trump would ever characterize himself as a witch. But if you ask Donald Trump, would you consider Hillary Clinton a witch? And his answer would be, I believe yes. You see, I believe that there is a scenario here where what Mueller has been doing, Dave, has been running a parallel operation to the real operation that's been going on with Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, and a prosecutor who was added to the mix, Huber from Utah. Huber, I believe, has been working with Horowitz on a parallel investigation. And we hear about all these indictments, these sealed indictments, these 40,000, 50,000, 51,000, 57,000 sealed indictments. And many people believe that's completely fraudulent and conspiracy theory. I believe these sealed indictments do exist, and I believe some of them have been opened. But I also believe many of them will not be opened. But the reason they won't be opened is because some of these people that have these sealed indictments are the very same people we see resigning throughout all levels of government, throughout Congress, throughout the House of Representatives, throughout the Senate, throughout Wall Street, throughout big business, throughout Hollywood. We have seen a mass exodus of people. And I believe this mass exodus of people is directly attributable to these sealed indictments. And I believe there are some folks that might have been involved in financial crimes or bribery, and I think they're being talked to, and they're saying, okay, here's the deal. There's this indictment, and it has your name on it. Now we can open it or we can keep it sealed. Now to keep it sealed, you're going to resign, you're going to move along, and you're going to turn over some evidence to us on some of these other players. And I believe that's what we're seeing, Dave. And I believe that operation is being run through Horowitz and Huber.
Now, Huber, we know he's based in Utah where the data center is, and he has the ability to look at a lot of data. So that does make sense and also he's outside of Washington.
Right. So when he convenes a grand jury to get indictments, right? Let me tell you something, and lawyers have told me this, is that you can convict a ham sandwich, it's always said, in front of a grand jury. On the other hand, where that grand jury is, has a direct role over who ultimately you're going to indict. And having Huber from outside the Beltway in Utah, where reportedly, as a prosecutor operating out of Utah, he can operate in any state of the union, it's my understanding, as far as convening a grand jury. It's my understanding from a legal standpoint that it's better to have somebody from outside the Beltway convening grand juries outside the Beltway to move the ball down the field. And Huber was a pick of Sessions. And that's the other side of this, because we have Twitter, I don't know, Trump going after Sessions in Twitter and comments and his press conferences and the like.
It's a Twitter battle.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where now we have like MSNBC and Kathy Griffin, the comedian, was holding Trump's head up, the bloody head up, right? And they're all embracing Sessions, right? Oh my gosh, this guy, Trump's against him, so we're for him. He's the one adult. He's one of the adults in the room, keeping Trump in line, and Trump doesn't like that, and that's why he's speaking against him. And people will disagree with this assessment, but I wonder how much of this Twitter war between Trump and Sessions is nothing but a psyops, and is nothing but kind of like professional wrestling, right? In the ring, they're going after each other, but when they get behind the curtain in the locker room, they're giving each other fist bumps, right? And I just wonder if right now, by doing this, the left, the globalists, have essentially embraced Sessions. MSNBC, CNN, they're all, Sessions, in fact, you and I spoke about this earlier, now there's this mention that, that senior level official in the White House that wrote that New York Times op-ed, that could well have been Sessions. He is an adult in the room trying to keep Trump in line, and it could well have been Sessions. So, you see, I think this is the game that Trump and Sessions are playing. They're getting all these folks that normally wouldn't support Sessions to support him. And I believe one of the ramifications, Dave, going back to the declassification of this document, one of the ramifications could well be, and again, it goes down to timing again, that we spoke of very early in this conversation. Why now on this declassification? One of the reasons why now is because the globalists, the progressives, the leftists have all painted themselves in a corner hugging Sessions. That wasn't the case 6 months ago. That wasn't the case 3 months ago. And they've gotten to the point where they're hugging Sessions on a daily basis at this point, and that wasn't the case a month ago. And I believe one of the ramifications of this declassification event, which I believe is going to be huge, is one of the ramifications is Sessions is going to at least partially unrecuse himself. And then the globalists, the progressives, the leftists that are hugging him now are going to be like, for them now to turn on Sessions, you're going to get the biggest case of whiplash you've ever had in your life.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to do. And I think this was like you've been saying, it's a perfect setup. And they've been playing the mainstream media and all those people that are against Trump, they've been playing them perfectly. And I think when all this comes out, we're going to see a lot of things happen. And I just want to go back to the individuals like Adam Schiff, because he tweeted out something ominous about red lines. And we talked about this before. And I just wanted to get your take on what you think this red line is. Why did he mention a red line?
So here's what Schiff said, right? This is after they did the announcement about the declassification. President Trump has intervened again in a pending investigation by ordering the selective disclosure of classified materials he believes to be helpful to his defense. Okay, we'll leave transparency out of this. The Department of Justice and FBI have previously informed me that release of some of this information would cross a, quote, red line, end quote. So I believe the red line was meant as a threat to the president. And I interpret, and I understand people are going to say we think this is hyperbole, but this is how I feel. When I read this, I believe it was a threat to Trump that if he in fact went along with, he pursued the declassification, pursued the unredacted version of the declassification, no redactions. I believe it was a threat at assassination by Schiff.
Do you think they're actually, I mean, they've been talking about impeachment, and the screams for impeachment are getting louder and louder, especially since he mentioned the declassification. Do you really think they're going to take it that far to assassinate the president?
I believe the deep state is panicked and they're desperate, and they realize that with transparency, it's going to, and with the reinstitution of the rule of law, which has been missing for decades in this country, many decades, that it means the loss of their control and their power. And I believe they will stop at nothing to block their loss of power and control. Now, I believe they will not be successful. And the reason, and when it comes to assassination issues, and the reason I believe that is because and some people right now are saying, well, wait a minute. In 1963, we had a president that took on the deep state, and he went to Dallas, and he came home in a box. That's true. But I believe what Trump has that Kennedy did not is several things. I believe, one, Trump has the support of the military. Number two, I believe in addition to the Secret Service, I believe he also has his own level of protection beyond the Secret Service. And number three, I believe Trump is so clued into the information axis that he has real-time information given to him that will always be able to, no pun intended, trump the deep state because of the level and the instantaneous access he has to information. And that's what I believe will keep him safe. Now, that being said, I also believe that when the deep state gets in trouble, their playbook, their business model, Dave, has always been chaos. In particular, false flag events. There isn't a war that hasn't started that they haven't loved. And I believe that as we get closer to this declassification event, because I believe it's that big, and I believe it will set the dominoes into play that will be enormous, I believe the deep state will try some major chaotic false flag event. And I believe they actually tried it the other night in Syria with the Russian plane that got shot down. The word I hear is that, the Russian plane reportedly was brought down by Syrian air defenses. The Israeli jets were coming in. They only gave the Russians about a minute notice as this plane was coming in to land. And as the Israeli jets were coming in, they used the Russian jet, if you will, as a block. And when the Syrian air defenses sent their missiles skyward, reportedly it took out the Russian plane. Then there's this information out there that there was a Russian frigate in the area and a missile could well have been fired from that. There's a report of that. It could well have been that whole event was set up by the deep state to institute what potentially could have been a world war. So let's say Putin took the bait And when the plane went down, the Russian plane went down, they had evidence that there was a French frigate that had fired a missile and potentially, if not precisely, it was the French frigate that actually took down the Russian plane. Putin then goes after the French frigate, France being a member of NATO, attack on one NATO allies, attack on all NATO allies, and everybody's in the soup, right? But what did Putin do? Look, I'm not a fan of Putin, but the guy's smart, and you can't discount that. You don't get to where he's gotten through the KGB and to the level of power he's at by being stupid. I think Putin recognized what it was. He condemned the Israelis for using the Russian plane as a block, right? He mentioned about the French frigate and the possibility that something was fired from them, but he never went after the French frigate, knowing full well if he did, it was an attack on NATO. Okay, so what did he do? And some people will say this is that he acted out of weakness. I don't think so. I think he kind of played out the steps. And what he said was, okay, we're not going to fire on the French frigate. You know, we have an indication that that's who brought us down. But what did he do? He announced later that same day, we're going to supply our Syrian forces and the Syrian forces and our Russian forces that are in Syria with the most up-to-date missile system. Take it from the S-200 to the S-400 system. So what he has done is he has now made Syria impenetrable to anyone flying a plane in there, right? So rather than take the bite of the apple going to World War III, what he did is he solidified his own position in Syria. So now, and he's told Israel and he's told NATO, they're going to have that system. And that system, we're not going to repeat what happened to our plane. You come in there, that's what you're facing. So I believe the deep state has already tried a cataclysmic false flag event, that being in Syria. The night of this declassification thing happened. It's the same day, later that night. And I believe it backfired on the deep state. That doesn't mean that they're not going to try something else, because they're desperate and they're panicked and they know they're about to lose their power and control. They're cornered rats.
When you say they're going to try something else, what scale? Is this like another shooting? Do you think this is going to be on the scale of 9/11? I mean, what do you think they're going to try to do here?
I think it's going to be on a large scale. And I think the large scale that I've always been concerned about has been, and many people have been concerned about, I know you've mentioned it, other folks have mentioned it, is an EMP event. It's my concern.
If they used an EMP, I mean, it would shut down pretty much almost everything electronically. I mean, the computers, the electrical system. At that point, we wouldn't even be able to communicate that well with other countries, with ourselves. How would this benefit them?
I think it would paralyze society as we know it and around the world. And paralysis means that they would be able to maintain power and control.
So if this would be a wide spread panic, and people in this situation would die because, you don't have power, you can't refrigerate food. It would be huge. And if I remember correctly, to replace the transformers, it's almost impossible, because it takes many years to create them, and I don't think they have them on hand, and it would be a nightmare situation. I mean, do you think this EMP would be the entire country, or do you think it just like a section just to create an event to clog up the news cycle, to get all the focus off of them?
I think that it would be a regional event But here is their problem. They have to have a delivery system for that to occur. And I believe that the Trump administration, because of their alliance with the military, I believe has essentially made it near impossible for them to have a delivery system for that event. But I still worry about it because, again, we have to worry about rogue players. But I do believe, look, I believe that the Trump administration is very proactive in this, very proactive in the prevention mode of this. But the one thing that has always concerned me about the deep state is a potential devastating event. And a devastating event for our world would be an EMP event anywhere in the world. It would have. We are so interconnected, as you mentioned, communications wise, with across the board. Whether it's trade, whether it's communications, whether it financially. So an EMP event anywhere in the world has ramifications everywhere in the world, and I do believe that the Trump administration, I believe, is been very proactive in trying to minimize the chances. I believe, Dave, one of the big reasons why Trump went out of his way to de-escalate the situation in the Korean Peninsula was precisely to prevent a potential source of an EMP event in the future. He's gotten a lot of grief for speaking with Kim, negotiating with Kim. He's gotten a lot of grief for negotiating with Putin. It's interesting. Many of these people that are criticizing him for negotiating with these, quote, tyrants, end quote, which they're not nice guys. They're bad guys. But unfortunately, sometimes you have to speak with, and sometimes you have to do business with people you'd rather not do business with or speak with for the good of society, for the good of the whole. And I do believe the downside of us negotiating with Kim and with Putin is very little. Because the upside is we prevent a potential nuclear holocaust that these players are potentially capable of. So I believe one of the reasons why one of the first things, the word I heard very early on through the Trump administration was that one of the first things Trump did internationally was reach out to North Korea. Long before, when he was tweeting about, where it looked like we were going to go to war with them, the word I heard was behind the curtain. The exact opposite was happening. That Trump, very early in his administration, within a month of him being inaugurated, had a dialogue with North Korea behind the curtain to try to de-escalate the situation. And again, what happens in public many times is very different from what happens behind the curtain. And I was clued in about this early on in the Trump administration, yet we didn't start seeing movement in front of the curtain on the de-escalation of North Korea until, over a year later. So, and then it was a shock, right? I mean, everybody's being, oh my, we can't believe this. Why would, what's going on? Well, what they're not telling you, even if I'm sure they're aware of it, but what they're not telling you, because they're owned by the deep state, the last thing the deep state wants is détente.